For the first time in South Africa, citizens are urged to participate in the Anti-Racism Week. The campaign is driven by the Nelson Mandela and Ahmed Kathrada Foundation and aimed at curbing racial tensions in the country. Well, we talk more about this issue now with Diversi-T's Managing Director, Teresa Oakley-Smith. Terry, it's great to have you in studio with us this morning. You've written extensively about this topic, and of course, you also work with issues of diversity in your own company. One of the arguments that you make is the reason why you feel racism is so misunderstood is because we deal with it as an experience rather than a systemic issue. Flesh out these two concepts.
I mean, I think, for example, this issue of the Anti-Racism Week and conference, we're focusing very much on people's attitude, people's experience of racism, and I'm not in any way suggesting that that's not extremely painful and problematic for South Africa. But I think we have to accept that the real root of racism lies in the inequality in our economy, in our businesses, in the way South Africans live their lives. I mean, I suppose when South Africans see, for example, the young girl who was raped and murdered in Khayelitsha, and then the young girl who was raped and murdered in Tokai, both tragic and terrible. But if you just get a glimpse of the differences in the way they live, you begin to get an understanding of the systemic differences that there are in South Africa. And that's the problem.
And you say that there would still be racism in South Africa even without people who are racist.
Yes, I mean, if all white South Africans and I'm not so sure there are racists of other colours, but assuming there are, suddenly had a change of heart and began to be full of goodwill, because racism is a systemic thing, because it's an economic thing, there would still be racism, because it's about very different experiences of living in South Africa, and we're concerned about South Africa at the moment. So while I would say that, the work that ANCA's doing and my company is doing and other companies are necessary, they really aren't sufficient, Cathy, because unless we actually address the fundamental inequalities in the economy and in the structures of the economy, we're not going to end racism.
And when we pinpoint to the structure of racism, I mean, South Africa prides itself in this idea of a rainbow nation, which you say is really all a myth.
I mean, I think it is completely a myth. I mean, I think it was perhaps something that we aspired to when Archbishop Tutu first put forward the notion. But I think it's given, especially white South Africans, a lot of comfort. Cathy, we got off scot-free after apartheid. We are living in exactly the same way, with the same benefits, the same privileges as we've always had. And so for us, this idea of a rainbow nation was kind of comforting. We can be all working together and chatting and greeting each other and all of that without actually having to give up anything, make any fundamental changes to our lifestyles. And so I feel it just is a myth. I mean, if you think about 2010, people would go to the stadium and whites would be sitting next to blacks and it was all wonderful. But, do you think those people are even in touch today?
And one of the things that you're really pointing to here is the idea of white privilege and the fact that there are still many white people who battle to understand what South Africans mean, or what white privilege actually is.
I mean, that's absolutely true, Cathy. I mean, I hear things like, I had to put my own self through university. Nothing was handed to me on a plate, without actually understanding that, life was fundamentally different. There were jobs. Jobs were reserved for us as white people. If we were ill, there were hospitals that were there for us. Our schooling was completely different. And now those privileges still remain. There's this sense that we, because of our complexions, because of our white skins, have the advantages that other South Africans don't have. And, that white privilege is something that you can't just shake off. You can't just say, I'm not privileged. Just by virtue of the fact that you're white and we have the history that we have, it's there.
So then what does it take to show commitment to changing the system? Because you say that it lies mostly in the economy. And so we need also big business to come on board and start changing its structures. But there's so much contention where the issue of BEE is concerned in affirmative action. How do we begin to show a shift in the right direction?
You know, I actually think the government needs to get a lot tougher. I mean, I've been working with and monitoring BEEs, employment equity, EE, since it first came in. And the changes have been very, very gradual. And I think a lot of companies, not all, but many just pay lip service to the notion. And there's huge resistance very often from white employees who regard it as reverse racism, which it certainly is not. I think the new BBBEE codes are excellent, and if companies really manage to comply with them and create jobs in the way that the codes allow them to, that could make a huge difference. But again, people are focusing on, you know, what am I losing? What are we as a small white minority who've gained so much from this country? What are we losing? And therefore, how can we resist? Instead of saying, listen, this is really a time when all South Africans need to come together. Let's support the codes. Let's do what we can to make them work. And let's turn our country around.
Oh, certainly doesn't sound like it's an easy truth to hear or even to tell.
It's a difficult truth to tell, but it's time for us to all tell it.
All right, that's where we leave it for this morning. Teresa Oakley-Smith, she's the Managing Director at Diversi-T. Let's take